The silence was deafening as Sarah Miller stood alone at the firing range. 20 pairs of eyes burned into her back, their judgment as palpable as the weight of the Glock in her trembling hands. She was the last candidate standing and the only woman left in the final SWAT selection process. "Remember Miller," Commander Mike Daniels' voice boomed across the range, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. 5 moving targets, 10 seconds. That's the standard. He paused, his lips curling into a smirk. "Though I'm beginning to wonder why we're even wasting ammunition. Everyone knows women don't have the reaction time for this kind of work." Snickers rippled through the line of male candidates behind her. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes forward, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her wounded. This was the moment that would either break her spirit or ignite something far more powerful. The quiet librarian, the Chicago Public Library, was quiet at 8:45 a.m., just as Sarah preferred it. She moved methodically between the shelves, sliding returned books into their rightful places with practiced precision. Her movements were efficient but unremarkable, just like her appearance. At 32, she wore her brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, minimal makeup, and clothes that seemed deliberately chosen to blend into the background. Nothing about her suggested anything beyond ordinary. "Morning, Sarah," called Diane, the head librarian, peering over her reading glasses. "Could you help Mrs. Henderson find that gardening book she's been asking about? You know, the one with the roses on the cover." Sarah nodded with a polite smile. This was her life: predictable, safe, invisible. Her colleagues saw her as reliable but forgettable. The quiet one. They called her when they thought she couldn't hear. Sometimes they forgot she was even in the room during staff meetings. Every day followed the same rhythm. Up at 5 a.m. for a solitary run through the park, shower, oatmeal breakfast, work at the library cataloging and shelving books, then home to her modest one-bedroom apartment where her aging tabby cat Scout waited. The apartment walls were lined with bookshelves, military history, tactical strategy, and criminal justice texts hidden among the fiction and poetry. At night, after feeding Scout, Sarah would sit by her window, watching news reports about rising crime rates in Chicago. She paid particular attention to stories about SWAT operations, leading forward whenever footage appeared of officers in tactical gear responding to high-risk situations. Her eyes followed their movements with unusual intensity, her fingers sometimes mimicking their hand signals unconsciously. No one at the library knew about the application form she'd filled out 3 months ago, or about the preliminary physical tests she'd been taking on her days off. No one knew about the gun range membership card tucked into her wallet next to her library ID. "You applied to what?" her co-worker Melissa had exclaimed when Sarah finally mentioned the SWAT training program 2 days before it began. "You? But you're so quiet, so normal. I mean, isn't that for, tough guys and adrenaline junkies?" Sarah had merely shrugged. "I guess we'll find out." That night, after Melissa's reaction, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, sliding a wooden box from beneath the bed frame. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, lay a tarnished medal she hadn't looked at in years. Her fingers traced the inscription as memories threatened to surface. Memories she'd spent years pushing down. Tomorrow would be the first day of SWAT selection, and for the first time in 7 years, Sarah Miller would have to reckon with who she really was. The nightmares returned. The nightmares had started again. Sarah woke gasping, the sheets damp with sweat, the echo of gunfire still ringing in her ears. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m., almost the exact time it had happened 7 years ago. She didn't try to go back to sleep. Instead, she made coffee and sat at her small kitchen table, allowing herself to remember what she'd spent years trying to forget. Before she was Sarah Miller, quiet librarian, she had been Lieutenant Sarah Miller, U.S. Army Special Forces, one of the first women to qualify for and complete the grueling training. Her marksmanship scores had broken records previously held by men with decades of experience. Her tactical decision-making under pressure had become case studies at West Point. But few knew this history. She had carefully erased that part of her life after Afghanistan. The mission had started like many others. Intelligence had identified a compound where American hostages were being held. Sarah's team, her family for the past 4 years, was sent in for extraction. The plan was clean, practiced, perfect. Jake would lead the first entry team while Sarah provided overwatch from a ridge with her sniper rifle. The operation had gone smoothly at first. Sarah had eliminated 2 sentries without raising an alarm. The team had successfully entered the compound and located the hostages. Then everything went wrong. Their intelligence had missed a crucial detail, a hidden tunnel system beneath the compound filled with enemy fighters. "We're compromised. Heavy contact." Jake's voice had crackled through her comms. "Sarah, we need cover fire on the east wall." She had repositioned instantly, picking off attackers with deadly precision as they emerged to fire on her team. One by one, she cleared paths for her teammates to evacuate with the hostages. 6 successful extractions under her protection. But Jake had been the last one out, ensuring everyone else made it to safety. She still remembered watching through her scope as he took fire while covering the final hostage's escape. She'd eliminated his attacker, but not quickly enough. Jake's hit. The frantic call had come over the radio. "We need immediate evac." Sarah had abandoned her position, racing down to the extraction point where Jake lay, bleeding heavily from a chest wound. His eyes had found hers as the medical team worked frantically. "You got them all out," he'd whispered, his voice growing fainter. "That's what matters." "Sarah, save your strength," she'd insisted, gripping his hand. "You're going to be fine." But they both knew it was a lie. With his last breaths, Jake had made her promise. "Don't let fear stop you from doing what's right. You were born for this work, saving people. Don't waste it." Jake died on the helicopter. Sarah received a Silver Star for her actions that day, for saving 6 teammates and 3 hostages through extraordinary marksmanship and tactical skill. But the medal meant nothing. She'd failed to save the person who mattered most. The trauma and survivor's guilt had been overwhelming. Sarah had requested a discharge, changed cities, and buried herself in anonymity. No more guns, no more responsibility for others' lives. No more chance of failure when people counted on her. The library became her sanctuary, a place where mistakes cost nothing more than a late fee. For years, this self-imposed exile had been enough, until 3 months ago, when Colonel Richards, her former commanding officer, had somehow tracked her down. "The world needs people with your skills," Miller he'd said over coffee she hadn't wanted to share. "Particularly Chicago right now. There's a new gang in town. Weapons traffickers with military precision. Sound familiar?" Sarah had recognized the description immediately. The same network that had supplied the insurgents in Afghanistan. The ones responsible for the intelligence failure that had cost Jake his life, had established operations in her new home. "I'm not that person anymore," she told Richards firmly. "The training program starts next month," he'd replied, sliding a SWAT application across the table before walking away. "Jake would want you to be who you really are." Sarah had intended to throw the application away. Instead, she'd found herself filling it out that same night, carefully omitting her military background. She wanted no special treatment, no shortcuts. If she was going to do this, she would prove herself from scratch, or fail trying. The SWAT challenge, the SWAT training facility, looked nothing like the library. Stark concrete buildings, razor wire, and an atmosphere of intensity that Sarah had almost forgotten. On the first day, she stood among 50 candidates minus 47 men and 3 women, as Commander Mike Daniels paced before them like a predator sizing up prey. "Look to your left, look to your right," he barked. 80% of you won't make it through this program. We're not here to fill diversity quotas or make anyone feel included. SWAT is about excellence under pressure. Period. His eyes lingered deliberately on Sarah, and the other women as he spoke. Some of you might be wondering if you've made a mistake coming here. Trust me, I'm wondering the same thing. The message was clear from day one. Women weren't welcome. But Sarah had faced worse prejudice in the military. She kept her head down and focused on the tasks at hand, completing the initial fitness tests with scores that placed her in the middle of the pack, deliberately holding back to avoid drawing attention. By the end of the first week, one female candidate had dropped out after sustaining an injury on the obstacle course. The other was struggling visibly with the physical demands. Sarah maintained her position in the middle, never excelling but never failing. Then came the team assignments for tactical exercises. Commander Daniels smiled thinly as he announced, "Miller, you'll be with Thompson's team." Ryan Thompson was the star recruit, tall, muscular, former college athlete, and, as Sarah quickly learned, Daniels' nephew. He was also openly hostile to her presence from the moment she joined his 5-man team. "Try not to slow us down too much, library girl," he said during their first briefing. "Maybe you can alphabetize our gear, while the men handle the entry." Sarah said nothing, but her silence only seemed to encourage him. The tactical exercise that day involved clearing a mock building and extracting a hostage dummy. Sarah had done this hundreds of times in her military training, but she forced herself to follow rather than lead. Even so, when the team hesitated at a junction, she quietly suggested, "Left corridor might be better. Better cover positions." "Did I ask for your opinion?" Ryan had sneered. "Stick to the plan. We're going right." The right corridor had exposed them to simulated fire from 3 directions. The exercise ended with the team killed and the hostage uncovered. During the debrief, Ryan spoke over her. "Miller hesitated at the entry point, throwing off our timing." It was a blatant lie, but Sarah saw the satisfaction in Daniel's eyes as he noted it down. "Hesitation gets people killed, Miller," he'd said. "Maybe reconsider if this is the right career path for you." The pattern continued for weeks. Her gear would mysteriously disappear before exercises. Her name was accidentally left off briefing lists. In the cafeteria, tables would suddenly become full when she approached with her tray. The locker room became a particular kind of hell. One morning, Sarah found her uniform slashed with a knife, the word "quit" written on her locker in black marker. Another day, her boots were filled with mud. She began changing in the bathroom stalls to avoid confrontation. The worst came during firearms training. Sarah had been assigned a shooting lane at the far end of the range, isolated from the others. On her 3rd day there, her shots went wild, missing targets she knew she should hit easily. "Pathetic, Miller," Daniels had commented loudly. "Maybe you should stick to shelving books." After the session, Sarah examined her weapon and found the sight had been deliberately misaligned. She fixed it in silence, said nothing, and returned the next day to shoot a perfect score, which earned her only suspicious glances and muttered accusations of cheating. Then came the viral video. During a rappelling exercise, Sarah's equipment had been tampered with, causing her to slip and fall the last 6 feet to the ground. She'd managed to land in a proper breakfall, avoiding serious injury, but someone had recorded the moment and edited it to loop her fall repeatedly, adding cartoon sound effects. The video circulated through the department with the caption, "This is why women don't belong in SWAT." Sarah had seen the video on a colleague's phone, pretended not to notice, and continued with her training. But that night, alone in her apartment, she'd allowed herself 5 minutes of tears before straightening her spine and returning to her studies. 2 days later, when the final tests were approaching, Sarah was summoned to Daniel's office. His smile was all predatory satisfaction as he slid a form across his desk. "This is a voluntary withdrawal form," he explained. "Sign it and you leave with dignity. Refuse and tomorrow's tests will be particularly challenging for you. I'd hate to see you humiliate yourself publicly." Sarah stared at the form, then back at Daniels. "Is there a problem with my performance, sir?" "Let's not play games, Miller. You and I both know women don't have what it takes for SWAT. You're not strong enough, not fast enough, and you certainly don't have the killer instinct. I'm offering you a clean exit. I'll see you at tomorrow's qualification, sir, Sarah replied, standing up without taking the form. Daniel's expression hardened. Your funeral, Lilla. Just remember, I gave you a chance. As she left his office, she overheard him on the phone. Thompson, make sure Miller's weapon for tomorrow's qualification has the heavy trigger spring installed. Let's see how steady her hands really are. The decision point Sarah's apartment had never felt smaller or emptier than it did that night. The weight of weeks of isolation and harassment crushed down on her as she sat on her couch, staring blankly at the wall. Scout nudged against her hand, but even the cat's affection couldn't pierce the fog of her despair. With trembling hands, she took her SWAT training uniform and threw it into the trash can. What had she been thinking? She wasn't a soldier anymore. She wasn't the woman who had once saved an entire team through extraordinary skill and courage. She was just a librarian who had deluded herself into believing she could reclaim something that was long gone. The photo of her and Jake, taken in happier times before that final mission, stared back at her from the side table. His smile, forever frozen in time, seemed to mock her now. She had failed him then, and she was failing his memory now. Tears streamed down her face as she picked up her phone and dialed a number she rarely called. Sarah. Maria's voice was surprised but warm. As the only female member of her former unit, Maria had understood Sarah's struggles better than anyone. It's been months. Are you okay? I can't do this, Sarah sobbed, the words pouring out. They're right. I don't belong there. I'm not strong enough anymore. I've lost whatever made me good at this. Slow down. Maria's voice was steady, grounding. What's happening? Sarah explained everything. The SWAT training, the sabotage, the isolation, and tomorrow's final test that she knew was rigged for her to fail. So quit, Maria said simply when Sarah finished. What? The response caught Sarah off guard. If you truly believe you don't belong there, then quit. Go back to your safe, quiet life at the library. Forget about Jake. Forget about all the lives you could save with your skills. Forget about all the women who might follow in your footsteps if you succeed. The harsh words stung, but Sarah recognized the strategy. Maria had always known how to cut through her self-pity. You remember Kandahar? Maria continued. When you were pinned down with just one magazine left. Everyone thought you were dead, but you made every shot count. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering. 14 targets, 14 perfect shots. Each one made while under heavy fire. They've been loading the dice against you from day one, Maria said, and you're still standing. That's not luck, Sarah. That's who you are. Sarah's gaze drifted to Jake's photo again, to his confident smile, and the words he'd scrawled on the back. Fear is temporary. Regret is forever. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. They switched your weapon for tomorrow. Serial number 457 has a modified trigger. Check your email. Sarah frowned, opening her email to find a message from someone identified only as Taylor, with an attachment showing the weapon assignments for tomorrow's test. Next to her name was indeed number 457, with a note, heavy trigger, 12 pounds pull. They're cheating, Sarah whispered. Of course they are, Maria replied. They're afraid of you. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Something shifted in Sarah's chest, a familiar feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Not quite anger, not quite determination, but a cold, focused clarity. She stood up, wiping away her tears, and walked to her closet. From the highest shelf, she pulled down a locked case she hadn't opened since moving to Chicago. Inside was her service weapon, the same model Glock she would be using tomorrow. Beside it lay her tarnished silver star. I'm going to make every shot count, Sarah said, her voice steady now. Just like Kandahar. Through the night, Sarah worked methodically, practicing dry firing exercises to rebuild muscle memory, setting up makeshift moving targets in her living room using household objects suspended from string. Hours passed as she reacquainted herself with the weight of the weapon, the rhythm of breath control, the perfect moment of trigger break. By morning, her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, but her hands were steady. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. It wasn't even about Jake. This was about justice, not just for herself, but for every woman who would come after her. "They want a librarian," she murmured to Scout as she prepared to leave. "Let's show them what kind of stories I can tell." The showdown, the firing range buzzed with tension as the final qualification test began. 20 candidates remained from the original 50. Sarah still the only woman among them. Commander Daniels stood with a clipboard, his face impassive as he explained the parameters. 5 moving targets, 10 seconds. Standard SWAT qualification. Miss even one, you're out. The targets were human silhouettes mounted on tracks that would zigzag unpredictably across the range, a test designed to simulate the chaos of real-world engagements. Under normal circumstances, it was challenging but fair. Today, Sarah knew the deck was stacked against her. Ryan Thompson went first. As expected, his stance was textbook, his focus absolute. When the buzzer sounded, he fired with precision, hitting 4 of the 5 targets within the 10-second window. The 5th shot was close, just outside the kill zone, but still technically a hit. A score of 4 out of 5 was impressive enough to earn congratulatory nods from Daniels and the other instructors. One by one, the candidates completed the test. Most hit 3 targets, a few matched Ryan's 4. None achieved a perfect score. Then it was Sarah's turn. As she stepped up to the firing line, she immediately recognized weapon number 457 waiting for her. The modified gun with the deliberately heavy trigger pull. Ryan sidled up beside her as she inspected the weapon. "Just between us," he whispered, "if you hit even one target with that thing, I'll be impressed. But we both know you won't. One miss, and you're gone." Sarah said nothing as she checked the weapon, feeling the resistance of the modified trigger. It would require nearly 3 times the normal pressure to fire, enough to throw off anyone's aim, especially with moving targets. Commander Daniels watched her with barely concealed satisfaction. "Clock starts when the buzzer sounds, Miller. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly." Sarah took her position, but instead of the standard shooting stance taught in the SWAT program, she shifted her weight and grip into something entirely different. A modified center axis relock stance, rarely seen outside specialized military units. A murmur rippled through the watching candidates. Someone whispered, "What kind of stance is that?" Sarah tuned them out. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds, drawing a deep breath. In her mind, she wasn't on the SWAT range anymore, but back on that ridge in Afghanistan, where every shot had meant life or death for her team. The buzzer sounded. The targets began to move. Sarah's eyes snapped open. Her first shot cracked through the air, hitting the leftmost target dead center in the head. A shot so precise it would have been impressive with a normal weapon, let alone one with a sabotage trigger. Without pausing, she tracked the second target as it zigzagged across the range. Another shot, another perfect hit, this time through what would be the aorta on a human. The third and fourth targets moved simultaneously in opposite directions. A deliberate attempt to force shooters to choose one over the other. Sarah didn't choose. She hit the third target with a perfect shot to the brainstem, then immediately pivoted and struck the fourth through the center of the cardiac bundle. 4 seconds had elapsed. One target remained. This final silhouette moved faster than the others, in an erratic pattern specifically designed to be unpredictable. Sarah tracked it calmly, her breathing controlled as the seconds ticked by. 5 seconds, 6 seconds. The range had fallen completely silent. Even Daniels stood frozen, his clipboard forgotten at his side. 7 seconds. Sarah fired. The fifth bullet struck precisely where the cervical spine would meet the skull. The shot that specialist operatives are trained to take when immediate incapacitation is required. 8 seconds. All 5 targets hit with kill shots, more precise than any seen during the day's qualifications, with a modified weapon. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then whispers erupted as the candidates processed what they had just witnessed. Commander Daniels recovered first, his face flushing dark red. "That's impossible. Check her weapon." The rangemaster inspected the Glock, testing the trigger pull. "Sir, this has been modified with a heavy competition trigger. Pull weight is at least 12 pounds. More murmurs from the group. A standard trigger pulled at 5.5 pounds. Sarah had just executed perfect shots with more than twice the resistance. "Beginner's luck," Daniels snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. "Miller, I want to see you repeat that performance. Different test." He barked orders, and an instructor set up a new challenge. A quarter-sized coin would be tossed in the air, and Sarah would have to hit it before it landed. "This is ridiculous, sir," one of the instructors murmured. "Nobody can make that shot with a pistol." "She cheated somehow," Daniels insisted. "This will prove it." Sarah stepped forward again, the same cold focus in her eyes. "Ready when you are, sir." The coin flashed as it spun upward. Sarah tracked it, fired once, and the quarter seemed to vanish in midair, replaced by the sound of metal striking the back wall. "Again," Daniels demanded, his voice tight. A second coin toss. A second impossible shot. Perfect. The third time, Daniels himself threw the coin with deliberate force, sending it spinning wildly. Sarah didn't even seem to aim consciously. She simply fired, and the coin changed direction in midair, struck dead center. The range fell silent again, this time with a different quality. It wasn't confusion now, but awe. From the back of the group, a voice spoke up. "I think we should check Lieutenant Miller's service record, sir." It was Taylor, a quiet, serious candidate but kept to himself throughout training. Now he stepped forward, holding a folder. "I took the liberty of running a background check after noticing some inconsistencies in Miller's application." He handed the folder to a stunned Daniels, who flipped it open. His eyes widened as he scanned the contents. Special Forces, Silver Star, combat deployment in Afghanistan. The ripple of whispers grew louder as candidates craned to see. "You lied on your application," Daniels accused, finding solid ground again. "You deliberately concealed your military experience." "I didn't lie, sir," Sarah replied evenly. "I simply didn't volunteer information that wasn't specifically requested. The application asked if I had law enforcement experience. I don't. It asked if I had completed police academy training. I haven't." "This is a mockery," Daniels sputtered. "You've been playing us all along." "No, sir," Sarah's voice remained calm. "I've been completing the training like everyone else, despite having my equipment sabotaged, my locker vandalized, and now my weapon tampered with." She gestured toward the modified Glock. "I wanted to earn my place fairly, not through special treatment." "Isn't that what you said SWAT is about? Excellence under pressure." The other candidates exchanged glances. Several nodded slowly. "This qualification isn't over," Daniels declared, desperation in his voice. "One final test. Full tactical scenario with hostage extraction. Miller, you'll lead Team 2 against Thompson's Team 1. It was a last-ditch effort to salvage his authority, to pit Sarah against the nephew he'd been grooming for leadership." Sarah simply nodded. "As you wish, sir." What followed was less a competition than a master class. Sarah's team moved through the tactical course with precision that spoke of years of high-level training. She communicated with hand signals, positioned her teammates for optimal coverage, and executed entry techniques that weren't even in the SWAT manual, but were standard for Special Forces operators. Her team extracted the hostage dummy without firing a single simulated shot. A perfect, silent extraction that left Ryan's team struggling to explain how they'd been beaten so thoroughly. As the exercise concluded, the usually loud training facility had grown unnaturally quiet. Every candidate, every instructor, even Commander Daniels seemed to be processing a fundamental shift in their understanding. In the silence, Taylor stepped forward again. "For what it's worth, sir, I served in Afghanistan too. Different unit, but we all heard about the one-woman rescue at Kandahar. 6 men saved by a single sniper who never missed." He turned to Sarah with something like reverence. "It's an honor to train alongside you, Lieutenant." A new beginning, the SWAT graduation ceremony, was held in the department's main conference room, a utilitarian space transformed by the rows of chairs and the podium bearing the department's shield. 20 candidates had begun the final testing phase. 17 had passed. Sarah sat ramrod straight in her chair, their newly issued uniform pressed to perfection. She was no longer trying to blend in, no longer hunching her shoulders or averting her eyes. She sat like the decorated combat veteran she was, her presence undeniable. Commander Daniels approached the podium, his face a careful mask of professionalism. The events at the range had rocketed up the chain of command, leaving him in a precarious position. The department couldn't afford the publicity nightmare of being exposed for systematic discrimination, especially against a decorated veteran. "Today we welcome 17 new operators to the Chicago SWAT team," he began, his voice lacking its usual bravado. "Each has demonstrated the skills, judgment, and character necessary for this elite unit." He worked through the names alphabetically, which meant Sarah would be near the middle. When he reached her name, a momentary tightness crossed his face. "Officer Sarah Miller," he announced, graduating first in her class with the highest aggregate scores in marksmanship, tactical planning, and physical fitness. A murmur ran through the room as family members and department officials processed this information. First in class? The only woman. Sarah approached the podium to receive her SWAT pin and official designation. As Daniels handed her the credentials, he leaned in slightly. "You made your point, Miller," he said quietly. "But this unit functions on trust and teamwork. Your deception regarding your background doesn't inspire either." Sarah accepted the pin, holding his gaze. "With respect, sir, my performance speaks for itself. I asked for no special treatment and received none. Quite the opposite, in fact. All I want is to do the job I was trained for." Daniels had no response. For perhaps the first time in his career, the commander found himself outmaneuvered on every level. As Sarah returned to her seat, Ryan Thompson intercepted her. His usual arrogance had given way to something more complex, a mixture of chagrin and reluctant respect. "I owe you an apology," he said, keeping his voice low. "What I did, what we all did, it was wrong. And what you did on the range was the most incredible thing I've ever seen." Sarah studied him, searching for mockery, but finding none. "I don't need apologies, Thompson. I need colleagues I can trust in the field. Can I trust you to have my back when it counts?" Ryan nodded solemnly. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." "Then we're good." She extended her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he shook it. After the ceremony, as families and candidates mingled, Daniels approached her again, this time with the department chief beside him. "Officer Miller," the chief began warmly, "your reputation precedes you. We're honored to have someone of your caliber join our team. I understand you've been offered a position as tactical trainer, as well as field operator." "I prefer field work, sir," Sarah replied. "That's where I can make the most difference." The chief nodded, impressed. "Daniels, make sure Miller gets assigned to Alpha Team. We need her skills front and center." When they were alone again, Daniels cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I was wrong about you, Miller. The department needs officers like you." Sarah looked at him steadily. "No, sir. The department needs the best officers, regardless of who they are. Gender doesn't determine skill, commitment, or courage." Before he could respond, A young woman in a police cadet's uniform approached tentatively. "Excuse me, Officer Miller," she began. "I just wanted to say—" She hesitated, then continued in a rush. "I'd almost dropped out of the academy last month. The guys said women can't handle tactical units, that we should stick to community outreach. But then I heard about you." Sarah's expression softened. "What's your name, cadet?" "Rebecca Chen, ma'am. I want to apply for SWAT training next year, but I'm scared. What if I'm not good enough?" Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out her tarnished silver star. She'd carried it with her today as a personal reminder of her journey. "This belonged to a friend who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," she said, pressing it into the cadet's hand. "He taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right despite your fear." Rebecca stared at the medal in wonder. "I can't take this." "You can return it to me when you graduate SWAT training," Sarah said with a smile. "Consider it a loan." As Sarah walked out of the department building that evening, the setting sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Her new SWAT gear waited in the trunk of her car, her first deployment scheduled for tomorrow morning. For the first time in 7 years, she felt whole again, reconnected to the person she was meant to be. A reporter who had caught wind of her unusual story approached, asking for a comment about being the first woman to top her SWAT class in Chicago. Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. "Sometimes the final shot is the only one that matters," she said simply. "Everything else is just practice." She drove home in the gathering darkness, Scout waiting at her apartment as always. But tonight, Sarah didn't sit by the window watching news reports of others saving lives. Tonight, she prepared her gear methodically, her movements precise and purposeful. Tomorrow, she would be the one answering the call, not because she had something to prove, but because this was who she had always been. A protector, a guardian, a woman whose quiet strength had finally found its voice. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community, where we celebrate quiet strength, real struggles, and unexpected victories. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.